In looking at how extremism is functioning electorally this year, today our staff was researching a potential story about consequences and repercussions for candidates who say bigoted things or who have a record of saying bigoted things on the campaign trail or in their political life before they got onto the campaign trail. And as we were researching this as a potential story, the list of bigoted statements from candidates running in this year's elections got so long that we realized the length of the list itself had become the story. Joining us now is the former Melissa Harris Lacewell, now Melissa Harris Perry, who's a Princeton professor of politics and African American studies, as well as an MSNBC contributor. Melissa Harris Perry, congratulations on your new last name and the occasion for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Tell me about I guess my own surprise here. Are we just finding this long list of sort of shocking statements on race because we're looking for them, or does it seem to you like there is an uptick going on here?
Well, I mean, I think we find it shocking because it's happening in the aftermath of the 2008 presidential election, right? It's happening after the first African-American president is elected, after the first Latina is appointed to the Supreme Court, after courts are beginning to say things like DADT, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and Prop 8 are potentially unconstitutional. I mean, it feels bad because it's happening right at a moment when things appear to be opening up around politics for marginalized people, and then all of a sudden we feel what feels like this crash in. But I just want to suggest a couple of things. I mean, the first is that it's clearly not just in the South. That map is such a powerful one, but remember that both North Carolina and Virginia went blue in 2008, and although we've seen some regression to red in those states, I think we have to give the South some credit. It's got some interesting different politics going on, and the spread of this kind of racial discourse in this America, where the racial discourse is also against anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim, anti-Latino immigration, anti-woman on reproductive choice, it's just so big that it can't be sort of contained in one regional story.
And I think that's exactly right, and it's a very important point. We call it the Southern strategy because that's how it was understood in the 60s, and that's how the Republicans described it amongst themselves even in the 1960s and the 1970s. But now it essentially, at least my understanding of it, is employing bigotry, employing racism for electoral gain. You risk being seen as a bigot, and you expect to pay some electoral price for that, but you gain bigoted votes in compensation. You gain votes from people who feel threatened by minority groups and by minority groups' gains in compensation. Even if the geography doesn't necessarily define this strategy anymore, does the strategy itself still work?
Well, but here's the point, right? Neither party has a clean slate historically and ideologically on race. I mean, the reason that the Southern strategy had to be employed by Republicans is because it used to be that the South was solidly Democrat, because that was the party of the white primary. That was the party of massive resistance. And by the way, it's the party in the contemporary era of the end of welfare on the backs of black women and the massive incarceration of black and brown men under Bill Clinton. So neither party has clean racial slate. So the question is, why employ it as an electoral strategy? And it seems to me it's because there's a belief that it will work. Parties only do what they think will work. So why is it? If the Republicans believe that you could go hard on bigotry and get sufficient white votes, given the demographic realities in this country, why don't Democrats go hard to get another winning coalition? Why don't Democrats go in a strong way for African American, Latino, green voters, for those voters who are, in fact, what would constitute a core, racial minorities, progressive environmentalist, and labor. Instead, the party has consistently attempted to try to hold on to sort of their segment of what they perceive to be the bigoted vote. Now, what I think that means is there's both an underestimation of who white voters are and what they're capable of. I think it also means that there's a kind of cowardice on the side of the Democratic Party in its unwillingness to stand firmly on a set of policy and discursive strategies that would pull together a community of LGBT, black, brown, environmental, and labor voters, exactly those voters who need something to be excited about out in 2010. So this is the moment when they need to do that.
Well, does specifically targeting that kind of a coalition mean calling out this strategy on the other side, saying, listen, you know what, when we talk about extremism in the Republican Party, we're not just talking about privatizing Social Security, we're talking about eliminating reproductive rights, we're talking about racist jokes by candidates in order to appeal to white voters who are looking for that sort of thing from a candidate. Does it mean calling out bigotry?
I mean, it could be that will be part of it, but that's going to be insufficient. The fact is that this new coalition also wants real policy initiatives. I mean, you can't just say, oh, the right is racist, and then you sit there as a set of policy initiatives and say the reason we need, for example, infrastructure is because big bad China is coming after us. You can't just say, oh, the right is racist, and then go after unionized teachers that primarily teach black and brown and poor students in this country. You can't just say, oh, the right is racist, and then fail to sort of set up a real policy initiative. And by the way, progressives on the left have to have a real clarity about the fact that we are in a two-party system, and a two-party system that often doesn't offer all the options we want, and this kind of hand-wringing anxiety that it's not perfect on the left. Now, that's a problem of progressive voters, but it's a problem of the party itself when it does not offer a platform, substance, that in fact challenges the racism on the right.
Melissa Harris Perry, Princeton professor and MSNBC contributor, and the person from whom I most regularly learn the most by talking to on TV. Melissa, thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel.